The West could be on the brink of a full-blown war with Russia. Well, that's the warning coming from a senior NATO commander. Amid fear of World War III, 90,000 troops will start military drills in the next few days in preparations for a new global conflict.
As Putin continues with his plan for world domination, could we soon see British boots on the ground in Ukraine?
We're still joined by Annabel Denham, the Telegraph's deputy comment editor. I mean, we have seen various countries getting together doing military exercises. I'm a keen watcher of these things and have been particularly disturbed by the naval drills taking place between Iran, Russia, China and South Africa. It's not abnormal for NATO to do similar things and make sure that if push comes to shove and we need to get together and actually work as one that we can. But the scale of this is unprecedented.
It is, but unfortunately, I think it is necessary. Like the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, warned last week, you know, we no longer have the peace dividend now. We need to get very serious about defence. And that's not just the UK, which does meet its 2% of GDP defence target as set by NATO, but we're one of a handful of countries which do. And we need to ensure that other nations are meeting their obligations. You know, we have multiple threats now from, of course, from Putin in Russia, but also Chinese aggression in the South China Sea against Taiwan. This is an increasingly unsafe world, of course, conflict, which is taking place in the Middle East. And what the war in Ukraine in particular, I think, has shown is how that nature of conflict can still take place even in the 21st century with tanks, with boots on the ground. And it shows the importance of conscription, of having reservists, of having, you know, troops which you can mobilise. And the UK has very few of those in its defence forces at the moment. And that's very troubling.
And also, don't forget, so the prediction is that we could be at war, or the West could be at war with Russia within 20 years. And everybody goes, oh, 20 years, big deal. Well, actually, the build-up to big conflicts, to wars, often go on for decades. And bit by bit by bit, the pressure gets racked up. And you're feeling now that we're definitely on the upward march towards some kind of global conflict. And that these things do take time. So this is alarming.
These things do take time, but unfortunately it looks a lot like after a failed counter-offensive, Ukraine is beginning to lose this war, and that will lead to Putin feeling emboldened, to the Kremlin feeling emboldened. And it's not out of the question, as Admiral Bauer has pointed out, for Putin to become more aggressive. It may be that he chooses to invade a Baltic nation, a NATO member, and then we are left with little choice but to mobilise our forces.
Really quickly on this, really quickly on this, because we're running out of time. But something I read over the last couple of days, which has sort of made my eyebrows shoot into my hairline, is the NATO Europe commander also pointing out that what are civilians going to do? Thoughts echoed, of course, by the Swedish foreign minister. We spoke about that the other week. And this idea that, you know, if we as citizens were called upon to defend our country, defend the West, defend our values or protect our families, have we got the wherewithal to do that? I look around at fellow Brits and think, no, we don't.
No.
Well, no, and I think that there concerns have been raised, certainly in private, by some former army officers, people involved in the armed forces, about whether very high levels of immigration is having an impact on people's willingness to perhaps join the army and serve their country. Perhaps it's because they are from the native population and they look around and it's a country they don't necessarily identify. But one final point I would just make is that I suspect that we will have a Trump presidency again, Trump Mark II, and he has made, you know, quite clear his feelings on certainly the conflict in Ukraine. And if I do think that Britain needs to prepare for war again, because we can't rely on the US.
Absolutely.